Brian Foote, the chief executive officer of HUMBL, has now decided to retire as many as 9,350 shares of the company's Series B preferred stock that is currently owned by him. So I'm going to go over exactly what this means and if HUMBL investors should be worried with this decision. And believe me, you'll want to pay attention because I think that this is an extremely important topic that all HUMBL investors should be aware of and exactly what it means for the company moving forward. However, I think currently the most important thing for HUMBL investors to keep in mind is that those shares are special because they are equivalent to about 93.5 million shares of the company's common stock. And considering the reduction of the number of common stock to such a degree, I don't think anyone should really be surprised that HUMBL saw a small surge on Wednesday. Nothing big by any means, but it still was a surge. And the time the request was submitted by the company, the market value of those shares stood at $100 million. However, just something to keep in mind, Brian Foote had earlier retired roughly 551.6 million pre-split common shares in the company, and it was those shares that had actually come from the share float in November of 2020. On the other hand though, I think it's also important to note that in the recent months, HUMBL has come into considerable focus due to the growth of its mobile payments business and all of the attention they've received in the media. I mean, we're talking about international recognition for HUMBL during the span of only a few months. That's pretty impressive, to be honest. So it seems like currently that HUMBL is finding support at around $1. And honestly, I know this stock has been trading sideways for what seems like forever. So I'll say this, if you're long on HUMBL, please have patience with this one. It might take a while for the stock to get moving, but regardless, once it does, I think HUMBL is going to become an important growth stock over the coming years. You just have to realize that right now, investors are basically waiting for another big run on HUMBL. So I'll get into those Class B shares in a second, but first I'd also like to go over some of HUMBL's other financials. So believe it or not, HUMBL actually recently closed on another $2.5 million in two new financings. And it's these two financings that will be used as a bridge to help HUMBL get to its $50 million equity financing agreement. And because of this, HUMBL now has $6 million in free cash in its bank account as of today's date, which is honestly fantastic if you ask me. But moving along, let's talk about those Class B shares for a second. So Brian Foote has agreed to retire over 9,000 shares of Series B preferred stock that he owns, which is equivalent of 93.5 million shares of common stock. And like I mentioned, the current market price of those shares is now over $100 million. So if we look in the past, Brian previously had retired 551 million pre-split common shares from the float in November of 2020. Which was also at his own personal cost, keep in mind. And the purpose of this share retirement is to reduce the overall company share count. But if we look at what all this means in its entirety, the main purpose of the share retirement is to reduce the overall company share count and protect investors from dilution as the company pursues its brand partnerships, top-line revenue, and market share acquisition strategies. So I'm sure the main question you're wondering right now is this a good thing? And the short answer is yes. This means that the company is buying back the shares and canceling them. The reason here is that he thinks that the stock is undervalued, so this should actually increase the overall value, which is a great thing for shareholders. And remember, the Class B shares are worth multiple Class A shares. And like I mentioned, this is just a good thing if your overall goal is dilution protection, which I know a lot of people did have concerns about for HUMBL. So is Brian profiting in any way from this directly? Not that I know of, other than of course the stock that he personally owns, which has a good chance of going up in value. So yeah, guys, that wraps up the update today. Overall, this should not be a concern for HUMBL investors, and I think we can only expect to see more and more good things coming out of HUMBL over the coming years, and I'll be sure to keep everyone updated on this channel. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time.